Welcome back to your weekly dose of Monday morning inspiration to help you take back control of your health and transform your mind, body, and gut. I'm your host, Ellie Breacher, a registered nutritionist and host of the Gut 360 podcast. And today I'm joined by an absolutely brilliant guest to talk all about why you're constantly tired. And we're diving into burnout, thyroid health, and autoimmunity. So grab a matcha, get comfy, or head outside for a walk whilst you listen to today's episode. I'm sitting down with Nicole Goode, a certified functional medicine practitioner, registered nutritional therapist, BANT registered nutritionist, and founder of the Good Health Clinic. Nicole is a postgraduate specialist in immune health, energy, and optimal health and longevity, including autoimmune disease, thyroid conditions, and stress and burnout as a root cause. She's the creator of the Autoimmune method, host of the Good Health podcast, and author of 3 times best-selling book Optimal You, Supercharge Your Energy, Strengthen Your Immunity. Seeing the benefits of a functional approach, Nicole retrained to help others heal and create a life of success and optimal health. What a bio. Welcome, Nicole, to the Gut 360 podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
Thank you for joining me. I'm so happy to have you here. Now, you work with so many high-functioning people who look healthy on the outside but feel exhausted on the inside. So what are you seeing most commonly in clinic right now when it comes to burnout and low energy?
Yeah, I think the most common presentation, probably that I see, I like to call it that kind of functional exhaustion. And it's where people are really still able to show up. They're still able to perform, still able to do their day-to-day things, maybe working, but they're kind of running on fumes. So maybe sleeping, but not recovering very well, eating relatively well. That's quite common with people coming into clinic, is actually the sort of kind of, I think my diet's pretty good. And generally, it is, there's things we can tweak, but generally doing quite well. They're probably exercising, but just feeling really depleted, not feeling like the person that they used to. That's pretty common comment that we get from patients coming into clinic, is I just don't feel like, the old me. And I think a really huge kind of pattern is this it's this HPA axis dysfunction. So that's the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And that's what kind of governs the stress response in our body. And it just becomes like really chronically overstimulated. So it disrupts these cortisol rhythms that we have. And cortisol should be higher in the morning to get you going and taper off with a nice curve sort of over the course of the day so that it's lower by the evening. But in burnout, that rhythm really gets kind of disrupted. It can become too high. It can become too low, where we can get a complete flat line where people really are in that kind of burnout state. So I think that sort of side of things with the adrenals, and that sort of what I call that sort of functional exhaustion, where people are exhausted but still able to do things. And also probably mitochondrial dysfunction, we see a lot of. So mitochondria, these energy producing parts of your cell that are literally just kind of not firing properly because of, usually with these people, with these sort of high performing people, because that stress, you've been at a stress state for sort of so long, the energy production at a cellular level has become impaired. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about sort of mitochondrial dysfunction, is that sort of cellular level of energy being impaired and people struggling with that. And it's really more than just kind of, I feel a bit tired, it's something is starting to go off in the body. And we get a knock-on effect then really with the hormones. So the adrenals is hormones, the cortisol is hormones, and then things like the thyroid as well, that I work a lot with, that we can see lots of thyroid hormones becoming imbalanced as well. So often subclinical as well. So not necessarily people who've got a thyroid disease, but just, subclinical things are getting missed on bloods. And it's that whole kind of picture of hormones becoming imbalanced, all different hormones and sex hormones as well can be included there.
Yeah, I know that can happen a lot. This is sounding all too familiar, not just as a nutritionist, but also even with people in my life. I feel like burnout has become so normalized, particularly in high performing women. So why do you think this is? Why are so many women struggling with burnout?
Yeah, I think it's a cultural aspect of we kind of equate exhaustion to dedication or to performance, to being productive. If you're tired, you must be working hard enough. And I think it's particularly noticeable, I think, in high achieving women, because we've been kind of conditioned almost to do it all, where it was, and I don't want to get where we're going too much into sort of the sexism of this, but it used to be women stayed home, looked after the family, men went out and did the jobs. That's the way things used to be. But I think now we've kind of become conditioned that actually women can have it all. And having it all, yes, is great. It's great that women can go out and work and have a career and do all those things that they want to do, of course. However, we are now kind of doing the careers, doing the family, looking after elder parents, looking after children, having relationships, looking after our health, having a social life. It's like we're trying to do everything. And we've kind of been conditioned to the fact that we can have it all and it's a good thing to have it all. And it's good that we have those choices, but we do need to be aware of the fact that, sometimes in life you can't have it all. You've got to look after your health, got to protect yourself as well. I think also for women particularly, physiologically, we're more vulnerable to this HPA axis dysfunction because of our hormone systems. So we have, it's more complex in women. It's cyclical. So we, with the estrogen, progesterone, cortisol, thyroid hormones, it's all very deeply interconnected, and it's all interconnected around our cycle. So when one goes out of balance, another does. So I think women are physiologically, we're a bit more prone to this sort of thing as well. I think with women as well, there's a little bit more of a delayed response to reaching out for help. I think that's something else I would say I see with women. I find a lot more, I kind of have the side of clinic where I'm working on people with chronic illness, so with autoimmune diseases, with thyroid conditions. And then I have the side of clinic where I'm working with people who are fatigued, struggling to do the day-to-day life, want to look at like optimal health, longevity, that's that sort of side of things. That longevity, optimal health side of clinic is much more full of men. And the chronic illness side of clinic is much more full of women. Now, women are more prone to autoimmune diseases, so that probably does skew it slightly. But I think there is the fact that the longevity, optimal health side is more full of men, I think comes down to the fact that men will reach out sooner than women will. And I think women are really good at kind of adapting, compensating, sort of putting everybody else before themselves. It's that sort of nurture thing that we have in us. So I think that's definitely part of the picture. I think it is social media as well. I think particularly again for women, I think there's this kind of performance wellness on social media, sort of have your green juice, go to the gym, do a 60-hour work week, and everybody's lives look so perfect on social media and trying to keep up all the time. And I think that probably masks how most people are actually feeling. I think if you could speak to a lot of these people genuinely and honestly, they would say, well, yeah, I maybe am doing it all, but I'm exhausted.
I think so many people would be saying that behind the scenes. I can definitely relate to that at times. And I mean, as you say, coming back to women having it all, I think it's not that having it all is impossible or a myth, but as with having balance in any area of your life, balance doesn't mean that the scales are perfectly weighted equally between family, work, relationships, health. It's impossible to have that perfect equal weighting. So what I think with balance is there will be times of your life where you are prioritizing work, and there will be times where you're prioritizing family, and there'll be times where you're prioritizing exercise and nutrition and sleep and everything you need to do. Ideally, you're working on all of these areas simultaneously, but it's never going to be equal. I think we are all so busy nowadays. So how can someone actually tell the difference between being busy, being really busy, and being genuinely burnt out?
Yeah, I think that's really important. Something you said there as well is when I'm creating protocols for patients as well, like quite often I will sort of say to people, we need to work on all these things, but we're just going to start here. Because actually, if you just give them too much to do, you're just overwhelming somebody even more who is already overwhelmed, and their body's already under pressure. So it is really important to prioritize and sort of say, what actually do I really need to work on right now? And what needs to be the focus in my life right now? And exactly like you said, that doesn't mean you can't do everything. It's just, sometimes we just need to focus in on something more than another. But yeah, in terms of the difference between being busy and being like genuinely burnt out, I think being busy is a circumstance. So, like for you and I, having back-to-back clinic calls or, things like that, we have a busy clinic day. That's being busy. Burnout is a physiological state. So and I think the key distinction is probably recovery. I think that's probably where we can sort of define the difference. A busy person will have a really busy day. They maybe get home, have a little sit down, have something to eat, and then they can get on with their evening. They might sort of say, oh, it's been busy and I'm a bit tired, and then they have a rest and they're fine. A burnt out person struggles to recover. So looking for things like waking unrefreshed, even if you've had 8 hours sleep, feeling worse in the morning or having that sort of crash mid-afternoon. That's the two sort of common times. So struggling to get up and get going in the morning, crashing in an afternoon. Tired and wired in the evening. So feeling really tired, but then getting that second wind of like actually wired, maybe, sort of from 9 o'clock onwards and can't get to sleep, even though you're really tired and you want to. So I think things like that. Emotional as well. So sort of feeling either emotionally flat or feeling a bit anxious. So that can come into it. Brain fog, poor memory, feeling slower on decision making. That's one that I see coming in into clinic a lot, particularly the men pick up on this one. They sort of say at work, I don't feel like I can make decisions quite as quick. I'm not firing maybe quite on all cylinders. So that's sort of signs of burnout. Things like salt and sugar, low libido, that's common as well. We see that a lot. Sensitivity with like lots of noise or lights, things like that. And not tolerating exercise as well as you used to as well. That's probably another one that we see coming in a lot.
I know that my listeners who are listening to this right now, so many of them are going to be nodding along, resonating with a lot of the things you've just described. Tired but wired is one that I think many people can relate to. And a lot of my listeners are also really interested in gut health. So how does chronic stress and burnout actually affect the gut and the immune system on a physiological level?
Yeah, so the gut and the brain they're in constant two-way communication, so via the vagus nerve. What happens in one affects the other and vice versa. So chronic stress activates your sympathetic nervous system, so the fight or flight response. That actively downregulates digestion. So blood becomes diverted away from the gut and digestive enzyme production drops. Your gut motility becomes impaired. When cortisol is kind of chronically elevated, so when we're sort of living in this, and it doesn't need to be great big stresses, but just when we're living in this low-lying chronic stress state, we get more intestinal permeability as well. So that's what people might have heard of leaky guts. That tends to be the social media friendly term. And really what this is the tight junctions in your gut are becoming looser, they're becoming more open. And then they're allowing more food particles through into the bloodstream, bacteria into the bloodstream, toxins into the bloodstream. So all things that should move through your digestive tract and be eliminated, they get into the bloodstream. And that triggers this kind of low-grade inflammatory response. So then your immune system becomes alert, and that's very metabolically expensive. So that's also then making you more tired because your immune system, it's like when you're sick and you get tired, that's because your immune system is firing. It needs a lot of energy to work. So we become more tired. And approximately, the figures change slightly depending on which study you read, but around 70-80% of the immune system resides in the gut. Particularly we have gut-associated lymphoid tissue. So particularly that's very heavy in the gut. And when the gut is inflamed or it's compromised, so this leaky gut situation is going on, or intestinal permeability, that gut immune function is compromised in tandem with everything else that's going on. So your gut affects your immune system, which then affects things like we get brain fog and things like that coming through as well. So there's a kind of real link between gut and brain.
There is absolutely such a big link between the gut and the brain. And speaking of gut health, I actually wanted to ask you, because something I'm seeing more and more is SIBO. I think a lot of people are starting to hear about SIBO. So firstly, for anyone who doesn't know, what exactly is SIBO and how might someone know if they have it?
Yeah, so SIBO is a condition where the bacteria that should be in the large intestine has sort of migrated upwards. So it's colonizing the small intestine, so small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And the symptoms that you can kind of look for, so bloating, generally we tend to find the pattern is that bloating that kind of builds over the course of the day. Not in everybody, but that tends to be the pattern that we see mostly. So lots of gas, abdominal distension, nausea. Sometimes people are alternating between constipation and diarrhea as well. And then linked to that kind of the gut and the brain thing, the fatigue, the brain fog, sometimes nutrient deficiencies as well, because it compromises your absorption. So they're generally the things that people can sort of look out for.
Okay, yeah. And if someone comes to you in clinic and they have a SIBO diagnosis, what would your step-by-step approach look like? How would you help them to resolve their symptoms?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is get tested. I personally generally don't do too much until we've done the testing. The reason for that is that there's two different main subtypes of SIBO. So you can be hydrogen dominant or methane dominant. And the approach that we would take does change. So with some testing, the approach that we would take doesn't alter dramatically. With other testing, it does make a difference to what we might do. So knowing which one you've got is really helpful. So I would say get tested. That would be the first thing. And then things that we can kind of look at. So I'm not a huge fan of restrictive diets long term, but they can be very useful short term when we're trying to deal with something. So something like a low FODMAP diet can be beneficial, but temporarily. So I see people who come into clinic and, they've been on it for like 2-3 years or something like that. And then we've got other gut health problems because they've been on too restrictive a diet. But temporarily, initially, something like a low FODMAP diet can be useful, particularly whilst we're trying to address the SIBO. And then doing things like looking at stomach acid. So low stomach acid is quite a big driver for SIBO. So having a look at that. And there's lots of things we can do with that, with like apple cider vinegar and digested bitters, betaine, HCl, but I wouldn't do that without being under the guidance of a practitioner. And then there's things that we can do as well then to deal with the actual SIBO. So herbal antimicrobials. I'm a big fan of things like oregano oils and berberines, allicins, neem as well has got quite good evidence behind it. So those things that can really help. And then working on the microbiome as well, really important to get back to that foundational gut health, I think, as well, even if it is something like SIBO. And working on the migrating motor complex, which is the MMC. That's quite often overlooked, actually, but it's the wave-like muscular action that we get through the gut to move things through the gut. And that sort of motility can be impaired in SIBO. So looking at sometimes prokinetic agents as well that we would use for things like that. Yeah, so I think with SIBO, it's one that I would say you probably do need to work with a practitioner on it because it's quite complex. But, there's lots that we can do to support it.
I definitely think working with a practitioner is a smart move if you've been diagnosed with SIBO, and supporting that MMC, which sometimes gets forgotten about. Now, let's come back to the immune system. You mentioned 70 to 80% of our immune system is located in our gut. A lot of people I see in clinic come to me thinking they have IBS due to ongoing and unpredictable digestive symptoms. But in many, the root issue turns out to be small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO. Recently, I've been recommending the SIBO Complex Plus by Ultravita, who is sponsoring this episode. It's a targeted herbal supplement containing a blend of 9 botanical extracts, including oregano, berberine, thyme, and ginger. Ingredients that are well researched for their antimicrobial properties. Ultravita's medical and nutrition team formulated this supplement using their extensive expertise and unique approach to digestive health as part of a 2-step SIBO protocol, which tackles the overgrowth and then replenishes your good bacteria and supports microbiome balance. As a valued listener of the Gut 360 podcast, you can get 20% off your first order by using the code GUT360 at checkout at ultravita.com. T's and C's apply. This episode is sponsored by IM8. I used to catch every cough and cold going, but since taking IM8 Daily Essentials, I've noticed a real difference in how resilient my immune system feels. It combines key immune nutrients like vitamin C, vitamin D paired with vitamin K2 for better absorption, zinc, with probiotics, prebiotics, and postbiotics to help nourish a healthy gut microbiome, as well as a powerful blend of greens and antioxidants to help protect your cells from everyday stress. It's also not pixie dust levels and actually has an impressive dose for everything mentioned. Use the code GUT360 for a special discount and free welcome kit on your first order. We know we should be consuming fermented foods for our gut health, but have you tried kimchi or sauerkraut? This episode is sponsored by The Cultured Collective, whose kimchi and sauerkraut are naturally fermented, unpasteurized, and tested for live cultures, as well as being a source of fiber. They've won awards for their flavor, so I'm not the only one who thinks they taste amazing. It's really easy to add a scoop of these real live foods to all kinds of meals. I love adding kimchi to the side of my eggs and topping avocado toast with sauerkraut. They're offering listeners of the Gut 360 podcast a huge 50% off their kimchi and sauerkraut, so head to the show notes to find out more. And I think a lot of the time, if someone is prone to getting colds in the winter, they might think, oh, I'm going to take some vitamin C. I'm going to have an extra orange and kiwi every day and strawberries. And yes, you can get vitamin C from your diet. You can take your vitamin D drops as well for your immune system. But think about supporting your gut, right? It's so important. So if
that's stress also reduces secretory IgA, which is that first line of defense. It's that sort of first first line of defense within the gut lining. So if that is reduced from stress or burnout, then it's making us more vulnerable to infections. So we see people that come and say, I'm getting colds more often and things like that. Also makes us more vulnerable to dysbiosis, which I'm sure you'll want to talk about as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's pause and give our listeners some practical tips at this stage. I mean, how can someone support their immune system, their energy, their gut-brain connection? What can they be doing practically?
Yeah, I think, like you said, you can do, there's diet and lifestyle things that we can do. I think the key things are you've got to manage the stress. So we've got to try and get that. We've got to try and get that sorted. So we've got to balance the adrenals. If you don't know where your adrenals are, I think adrenal stress tests, are really helpful. So it's just a saliva test, but I think it's really good to actually see where that cortisol curve is at with you. So if you want to sort of really personalize it, I think that's a really good thing to do. In terms of some tips, getting outside first thing in the morning, getting daylight into your eyes, helping to reset that cortisol curve, I think is really important. And if it's really bad, obviously, we live in England and it's currently, we're kind of coming out of winter, but we're still kind of there at the moment. It's not been particularly great weather, but even standing by a window and looking outside, just for 10 minutes, first thing in the morning when you get up is going to help. So I think daylight, gentle movement, I think more often than not, people always think I'm going to tell them to do more exercise. Actually, more often than not, I'm trying to pull people back because people are actually doing quite intense exercise. They're doing HIIT workouts or heavy cardio. And actually, I think just pulling back and doing, gentle walking, a bit of swimming, stretching, yoga, Pilates, any of these things that can be a little bit more gentle, I think is really helpful as well. So that on the exercise front, all helping us kind of manage that stress. I think that's the first thing when we're talking about looking after ourselves. I think a vitamin D supplement through the winter is good, always with vitamin K in. So I always take vitamin D3 with vitamin K2.
Me too.
Yeah, I think really important. A lot of things, I've had more people asking about vitamin D actually when they come into clinic and sort of saying, I've read that you shouldn't take vitamin D and things like this. And it can knock off other vitamins, particularly the K. So always take sort of D3 with K2. And most good, if you're getting a really good quality vitamin D supplement, will have K2 in it. So yeah, that I think particularly if you are in the UK through the winter, vitamin D is going to help with that immune system. If you start to feel yourself getting sick, I think vitamin C is a great thing to take. I like the alternate liposomal one. So as soon as I start to feel like anything like that's coming in, vitamin C is good. Zinc as well. So that's sort of on the supplement front if you're looking at immune function. Dietary wise, get your veg up, really increase your veg intake. I know it's 5 a day in the UK is the sort of national recommendation. It's not enough. And it's that simple. It's just not enough. 8 veg a day, 2 fruit a day is what I generally try and get people to aim for. Lots of different colour foods as well. So we have something we use called the phytonutrient chart, which has got these different coloured foods on there. So the red, orange, yellow, green, blues, and then or blues, purples, and then sort of whites and tans. They're the sort of 6 colours. Making sure you're getting 2 of each of those in a day. So plenty of different coloured foods. They're different colours because they've got different nutrients in them.
Yeah,
make sure you're getting a nice wide, broad range of nutrients into your diet.
And if this is sounding overwhelming to anyone, you don't need to change all of this overnight. You don't need to go from eating 3 fruit a day to 8 veg and 2 fruit by tomorrow. Just build up slowly and gradually. Make your plate more colourful. Eat the rainbow. That's what I always say.
I think a really nice, easy one with that is every time you go to the supermarket, try and put 2 foods in your basket that you've either not had before or not had for 3 months or so, not had for a good few months, because we are creatures of habit. So I think we do tend to we go to the supermarket and we put the same things in our basket every week because we're sort of like, oh, I'll make that and I'll make that and I'll make that. And it's just, we are creatures of habit. It happens. We're all guilty of it. So I think just a really simple one is just pick up a couple of foods that you haven't eaten for a while each time you go to the supermarket.
Yeah.
Or buy different varieties of foods that you already eat. So if you always buy, gala apples, buy Pink Lady instead. Just switch up because the different varieties have different things in as well. If you buy tomatoes all the time, try and buy heritage tomatoes so that you're getting a pack that's got orange, green, red, and yellow tomatoes in rather than just the red ones. So just little simple tweaks like that can really help with that kind of diversity, different coloured foods, getting different nutrients in. in a relatively simple way, just thinking about, it's just being a little bit more intentional, I think, with the supermarket shop, because we are those sort of creatures of habit and we tend to stick to the same things.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love that tip. Now, one thing I'd love to talk about with you is thyroid dysfunction. I know a lot of women struggle with thyroid issues. So, well, let's start there. Why do so many women in particular develop thyroid dysfunction?
Yeah, I think, again, it comes down to the hormones. In women, it's all part of the endocrine system. So we've got, your sex hormones, your thyroid hormones, your hunger hormones, stress hormones. It's all part of the same system. And I very much talk about the body as being, one interconnected system. And I think this is where sometimes conventional medicine goes a little bit wrong, particularly with thyroid. Women are actually 10 times more likely to develop a thyroid condition than a man. So it's significantly more. It's not just sort of slightly, it is significantly. The estrogen in thyroid is very, very deeply interconnected. So estrogen increases the levels of thyroid binding globulin that we have, which binds to thyroid hormones. So it reduces the amount of free sort of active hormone that is in the body that's available for use. Estrogen dominance as well is particularly common around that sort of perimenopause sort of age, which is unfortunately always also an age where thyroid conditions can develop. So anytime, I think thyroid conditions are more prone to kind of coming out anytime where we've got a hormone sort of cycle. So after pregnancy or during pregnancy, around perimenopause, all of these times sort of make that risk a little bit higher. That estrogen dominance in perimenopause, that has an impact as well. So it directly suppresses thyroid function. So that's another sort of reason. Again, just because women, I think, are a bit more prone to this HPA axis dysfunction, so the burnout, there's that sort of pressure, I think, on women to kind of do it all and have it all. Yeah, the life stages. And nutrition, probably a little bit nutritional vulnerability as well. I think I probably see a bit more on things like iron deficiency in women. Selenium, probably I see lower in women, more in clinic, which is very important for thyroid function. Yeah, so maybe there's a few of those, but I think predominantly it's that hormone sort of picture. It's the, estrogen dominance, the sort of connection between estrogen and thyroid hormones, and that sort of HPA axis dysfunction and life stages in women around our cycles as well.
Yeah, definitely. Lots to think about. And so many women and people in general, are told that their thyroid blood tests are normal, but they still feel terrible. So yeah, what's going wrong here from your perspective? What is missing in the way that thyroid health is usually assessed?
Yeah, this is one of the things I'm really passionate about and really want to try and help people understand and change. Standard NHS thyroid testing typically looks at TSH levels, which is a thyroid stimulating hormone, which is actually coming from the brain. So it's telling the thyroid that we need more thyroid hormones produced. But TSH it's one part of the picture. It's also, I've got quite a wide reference range. So I think the reference range is roughly about 0.4 to 4, I think, roughly on the NHS. So someone could be 3.8 and told that they're normal, but feeling really terrible. So functional medicine, we use a much tighter range. So we use between 1 and 2, we sort of say is the optimal range for that TSH level. So I think the ranges are a problem. The fact that we're only testing TSH usually on the NHS is a problem. You might be lucky and get free T4, which is one of the hormones. But your thyroid produces 90% of the hormone it produces is T4 and 10% is T3. But T3 is the active form that can be used by our body. So we have to convert T4 into T3. If we're only looking at TSH and T4, we know how much of the inactive, the storage hormone that you've got, but not how much can actually be used by the body. So I think that's one big part of the picture that the NHS sort of misses. In functional medicine, we always measure that T3 as well. So we're looking at how much have you converted from T4 to T3? So how much have you got in the body that is active that can actually be used by the body? Because that's the really key thing, the really important bit. And sometimes we see people who've got poor conversion between the T4 and T3. And that would never show up if we're just looking at TSH, or even if we're just looking at TSH and T4. So doing a full thyroid panel, really, really important. And then looking at the antibodies. So hypothyroid is more common than hyperthyroid, although we see both in clinic. But hypo is more common. 90% of hypo cases are Hashimoto's, which means that it's autoimmune. So it has autoimmune drivers behind why you're hypothyroid. More often than not, Antibodies are not getting tested. I get so many people come into clinic who've never had their antibodies tested. They don't know if they've got hypothyroid or Hashimoto's. And that's a real problem because we need to, if you've got the autoimmunity in the body, there's two sort of sides to the thyroid. We've got the thyroid function, which is the TSH, the T4, the T3. It's how you're producing the hormones. And then we've got this autoimmune picture. So what are those antibodies doing? Do you have autoimmunity? If you do, we need to be not working just on the thyroid. We need to be working on the immune system and that immune balance. So that's really important as well. So looking at those antibodies. And reverse T3 we sometimes look at as well. That can be really worth looking at in chronically stressed patients. So if we're talking about that sort of burnout, we can shunt T4 into reverse T3, which is kind of a protective mechanism that we have against stress. So when we're stressed, we tend to do this more, but that can actually leave you more functionally hypothyroid, even if your kind of bloods are looking normal. So that can be another figure that can be worth looking at in somebody who is stressed. So I think a lot of the time we get told we're normal because we're just looking at one marker within the blood. You can still feel awful. I think as well, those ranges are really wide on the NHS, and actually people need to be within a tighter, more optimal range to feel better. So I'd say they're the two sort of main things.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to think about, and the average person just wouldn't know this. They would go to their GP and they would get tested probably for TSH. But testing aside, what are some other early warning signs that someone might be able to look out for that can show that they are probably heading towards autoimmunity? Is fatigue the key one? Is it the kind of stress and burnout, or is there anything else we should be looking out for?
Stress, I think, is probably one of the biggest triggers that I see coming into clinic for autoimmune. I think the thing people need to understand with autoimmunity is that it's not kind of it's not just a case of it switches on one day and you have it, or the day before you didn't. It's this sort of spectrum. The antibodies that we test for, they can show up kind of 10 years before you would reach what we call disease state. So actually getting diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. So let's just take Hashimoto's as an example. You could have those antibodies and inflammation going on in the body 10 years prior to reaching a point where doctors will say you've got Hashimoto's. The beauty of having that 10 years is that you can actually do a lot to push that back, reverse what's going on in the body, push things back into remission before you reach disease state. But most of the time, we don't do anything about it until we reach disease state. So we wait until we feel really, really rubbish, or we go and get those blood tests done and they say, oh no, they're normal. So we just sort of leave it and just, I just must be like tired, I must be busy, I must be stressed. And we just put it down to that and we kind of ignore it because we've been told the bloods are normal. And then we're slowly creeping towards disease state. They wait for us to get worse. And then once we reach disease state, they say, okay, so now I'll give you some medication. So really what we want to do is kind of jump in earlier. The signs to look out for, so that fatigue, that sort of persistent fatigue, unexplained fatigue, things that doesn't respond to rest. So you rest and you're just not feeling better. You're sleeping, but waking up still feeling tired. That sort of fatigue. Recurrent infections as well, so particularly if you pick up a lot of viruses through the winter, or if you pick up a lot of common colds. Things like hair loss as well. Women probably notice that more than men. Changes in hair texture, hair loss, things like that. Joint pain as well. People just put down to old age. Even if they're just like middle aged, they sort of go, oh, joint pain, a bit more stiff in the morning. I'm just getting that little bit older. We really shouldn't have that. Skin changes as well. So developing, dry skin, sensitivity to sun, things like that to look out for. Digestion. I know your people listening to this will be keen on the digestive side of things. So bloating, food intolerances that develop in adulthood, not sort of ones that have always been there. Changes in bowel habits as well, things to look for. That brain fog and cognitive changes, again, with that link from the gut to the brain. Temperature dysregulation, a really common one that we see in autoimmunity. And having a family history of it, of course, as well, because there is a genetic component to it, although a lot of what comes is from that sort of lifestyle side of things.
Definitely. And I think it's so easy to experience one or two of these symptoms, but look at them in isolation. So people think, oh, I'm struggling with hair loss, I'm going to go and take biotin, or the latest hair gummy that I see on Instagram, or I've got joint pain, I'm going to, whatever it might be. People tackle these symptoms individually. So what can we do to actually calm autoimmune activity in the body through lifestyle and nutrition? Let's say someone came to you in clinic and they've got, let's take Hashimoto's as an example. So the autoimmune low thyroid, hypothyroid. What would you do without giving us a full consultation?
Yeah. So I think, there's a lot of evidence out there that lifestyle and nutrition can have a really profound effect on autoimmune activity in the body. So there is, there's plenty out there now that says that this works. There's lots of studies that have been done into conditions like Hashimoto's, rheumatoid arthritis, MS, lots of these conditions, inflammatory bowel diseases as well. There's lots of studies out there now. So we really can draw on the science. And I think that's really important, is that we have some of these studies. We can really build protocols that are built on science. And that's really important. The aim is to sort of reduce antibody levels, reduce that symptom burden, push people kind of back down that spectrum, reduce inflammation. So that's the aim of what we're trying to do. Things like omega-3 fatty acids are really good. They have those sort of immunomodulatory effects of balancing the immune system, helping to balance that kind of pro-inflammatory state to an anti-inflammatory state. Lots of anti-inflammatory foods, vitamin D, which difficult to get through diet. And if you live in the UK, probably pretty difficult to get through the sun. So again, that might be a supplementation. So things like that around diet, diversity in the diet, supporting the gut health, really important as well. Sleep, I think, is just probably one of the most powerful things that we can do. Even just one poor night of sleep has a really profound effect on those sort of inflammatory cytokines in the body. Sleep is when we're clearing up the body, clearing up sort of any damaged cells in the body. So if we're not getting really good restorative sleep, we're not cleaning up. We're not having that process happen for the immune system. So just from an immune regulation point of view, really important. So sleep, I think we can get lots of lifestyle factors in with that. I think that's really important. But I mean, there's so much that we can work on. But yeah, I think if people want to just start making little changes, omega-3 fatty acids, I think, is a great place to start. There are certain autoimmune conditions where removing gluten helps, but I would do that with a practitioner. Certain conditions it's more important for. So I would work on a practitioner with that. If you want to do things at home, I think working on that gut health, the diversity, omega-3 fatty acids, so with the oily fishes, olive oils, avocados, things like that, really good to get in there. And they're really simple things that you can do, just day to day.
Amazing. I love these actionable tips that people can take home. And I also, of course, love the 360-degree approach, looking at sleep, looking at stress, looking at all these lifestyle factors as well. We finish each guest episode with a quick fire round. So are you ready?
Yes, let's go.
What's something that seems healthy but often backfires for your health?
I think trying to do it all. I think almost trying to be too healthy. So I think we want to work on exercise, we want to do more exercise, we want to work on sleep, we want to have the healthy diet, we want to kind of have this picture of perfection. I think that can actually be damaging. I think just pulling back and sort of saying, what one or two things could I implement today and work on those, get them consistent, get them to build into being a habit, and then work from there and add something else in.
Such a good one. What's one healthy habit that people can start implementing today?
Morning light. So regulating sleep, I think, is the thing. So morning light and a good sleep routine before bed. So getting rid of, screens before bed and just having that sort of 30, 60 minutes prior to going to sleep without things like that. I think working on sleep's really important.
What's your favorite gut-friendly food?
Bone broth, I think.
Love it. I love bone broth too. What's your go-to breakfast on busy days?
Probably a porridge that is, I like to call it pimped up porridge. So with, lots of seeds and nuts and berries and things like that in. So yeah, something like that.
Delicious. Yum. What is one nutrition myth or wellness trend you wish would disappear?
I think that just because something on tests says it's normal, that we should feel fine.
True. What's one healthy habit you're still working on?
Everything. I think for me, probably the one I struggle with, which I think is one that probably most people struggle with, is finishing work earlier in the evening, putting down those screens. I think that's one that I'm always going to have to battle with and remind myself of.
Me too. We're in the same boat here. We'll finish this round with a few fun ones. Coffee or matcha?
Coffee, always.
What's your coffee order?
I like a cortado, so I like quite strong coffee with just a little bit of milk.
Favorite coffee shop?
Near us, we've got one called The Old Garages and we've got one called Modern Farmhouse. I love both of those.
Nice. Overnight oats or eggs on toast?
Weekdays, overnight oats, weekend eggs.
Agreed. If you could only do one type of exercise for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Easy, reformer Pilates. It's my favorite. I love it.
I love reformer as well. And lastly, what is one word you associate with a healthy gut?
Diversity.
Great one. Thank you so much, Nicole, for being a guest on the Gut 360 podcast. How can people find out more about what you do? And also, can you tell us about your book, your free offerings?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram, which is at Good Health Clinic, and Good's got an E on the end. You can find our website, which is goodhealth.uk. So it's GOODE health.uk. So that's the sort of clinic. The book is called Optimal You, Supercharge Your Energy, Strengthen Your Immunity. It's available everywhere. So it's on Amazon, bookstores, Waterstones, whichever ones you like to go into. We've got the studio launching as well in late spring, early summer, which is going to be programs, so sort of self-led programs that people can work through. That's launching soon too. And we've got the podcast, the Good Health Podcast, which obviously has lots of free episodes on there for people to listen to and get tips on.
I love your podcast. It's so informative. Thanks so much again, Nicole, for your time. And thank you guys for listening to today's episode of the Gut 360 podcast. Don't forget, you can subscribe. You can leave us a 5-star review wherever you're listening. And it goes without saying, if you know anyone struggling with burnout, thyroid health, autoimmune issues, please share this podcast with them. I hope you have a beautiful week ahead, and I'll be back in your ears next Monday with another episode.